in darkness conceives as right what is wrong, and sees all things in a perverted way, contrary to the truth, that intellect of Partha Arjuna is of the nature of dullness. The word ya is used meaning that in a feminine gender. That intellect which enveloped in the mode of tamas, dullness, conceives as dharma what is adharma, and sees everything in its contrary meaning. This intellect is of the mode of tamas, dullness. The phrase tamasa avruta is used, and Shankaracharya says that this means enveloped by ignorance in the form of darkness. Other commentators say that this means enveloped by avivek, non-discrimination. The word dhamma is used, and of course there is the meaning of the mode of tamas, dullness, that we're looking at, but the Sanskrit meaning of the word dhamma is darkness. Tamasa jyotir gamaya, take us from darkness to light. Such an intellect is enveloped by ignorance in a form of darkness, or enveloped by avivek, non-discrimination. In this verse, God states 4 characteristics of an intellect of the mode of tamas, dullness, and we would also see what its consequences are. This is a subject worth understanding. First of all, the characteristic of an intellect of the mode of tamas, dullness, is thinking about objects. The intellect that keeps constantly thinking about objects, and objects, such an intellect is of the mode of tamas, dullness. This is because objects are right at the bottom of the different layers of existence, or the progressive layers of existence. Science calls such objects matter or non-living. They are right at the bottom. Above objects come the body. This is because the body is in the way of an object, but the soul has entered into it, and therefore it looks as if it's living, and it looks as if it's conscious. Objects include tables, chairs, and pencils. There cannot be a soul inside objects. Objects cannot move around and do not have the power to make decisions themselves. The body is at the root, like a table. It is made up of the 5 great gross elements that are earth, water, fire, wind, and ether. But there is a soul inside the body, and that is why we think that I am doing this inside the body. The body is walking, running, and doing everything. Therefore, objects are right at the bottom, and the body comes above them. Greater than the body is the mind, and the intellect is above the mind. And greater than the intellect is the soul. Yo buddhe paratasu saha. Greater than the intellect is he with a capital H. And above the soul is a supreme soul, if you wish to calculate this. Therefore, there are objects, the body, the mind, the intellect, the soul, and the supreme soul. This is our journey. Then you can create subdivisions in these. For example, in the body, there's a body of the animal, the body of the human being, the body of a woman, the body of a man, a weak body, a strong body, etc. But we do not want to go into this into detail because the subject will go on forever. Now, if one develops from objects, then the body comes. If one develops from the body, then the mind comes, and then the intellect is above the mind. If this intellect goes in the upwards directions, then it's able to investigate the soul. Instead of that, such an intellect goes 2 steps down and leaves the body and mind to run after objects. If it holds on to objects, then when there is a necessity, then it's a different thing. But if it constantly thinks about objects, then the intellect becomes matter. Hiranyakashipu was Prahlad's father, and we call Hiranyakashipu a Rakshas, a demon. In everyday language, people call Hiranyakashipu by many different names, such as Harnakamsa, but in Srimad Bhagavad, the meaning of the name is Hiranya, meaning gold, and Kashipu, pillow, meaning one whose pillow is made of gold. By saying that his pillow was made of gold, this does not mean that he was putting jewelry in the pillow. After getting tired after a whole day, when he hits the pillow and his head touches the pillow, then his mind and his intellect constantly thinks about gold, silver, diamond, pearls, rupees, and wealth. A person who thinks like this is an asur, a demon. Then he has no feelings. This is because the mind creates feelings, but he has gone below the mind, and therefore he does not care about feelings. He does not even care about the body, and he only wants objects. That is why you will see that because he runs after and he wants only objects of rupees, money, gold, silver, etc., he does not look at the feelings of his family, he does not care about his body, and all that matters to him is money and objects. It's all objects, objects, and objects for him. His intellect becomes matter. There are 2 types of objects, organic and inorganic. Organic objects are the everyday objects that we talk about, and inorganic objects is something that is above objects. No doctors have proven that what the intellect thinks about objects, then the activity of the brain cells become feeble. This is the latest development in the field of psychology. If a person is constantly preoccupied with his business, then it's fine. then this is his field, and it's running there, but he cannot take any decisions elsewhere. No matter what happens outside his business, he thinks that there's nothing else in the world apart from his business. His wife insisted him that they'll go on a 7-day holiday to the hill station, and when he's at the hill station, then he's just sitting there looking around. At the very most, he goes up there and thinks, what business is there to do here? Can what we make get supplied here? See that this person has only walked in one direction. There are trees at the hill station and also waterfalls, lakes, natural beauty, etc. But he cannot get bliss out of any of this. He cannot play with his children, and he cannot become like his children. He's just sitting there foolishly, and that is it. What has happened? It is because constantly for 20 years, 25 years, 30 years or 40 years, his intellect has only thought in one direction. It has become matter. The other branches of it that were meant to develop did not develop. It became matter. This is called an intellect of the mode of dhamma, stonus. Do not take the meaning of this to be that if a person's intellect is of the mode of dhamma, stonus, then the person is mad or stupid. No, the person just constantly thinks about objects. He constantly thinks about objects. That is why it's called an intellect of the mode of dhamma, stonus. And what are the consequences of this? Thinking about objects is the opposite of thinking about the soul. This is because while thinking about objects is going on, then spiritual thinking cannot take place, and while spiritual thinking is not taking place, then development cannot take place, and liberation remains far away. This is the first consequence of an intellect of the mode of dhamma, stonus. The second characteristic of an intellect of the mode of dhamma, stonus, is a retardation of the intellect. This is a characteristic of an intellect of the mode of dhammas. Because of the retardation of the intellect, three things happen. The first is one cannot understand and grasp the message of the scriptures or one's guru correctly in the way that it is. Vedantis say that the intellect must be sharp in order for one to progress in spirituality. One must have a sharp intelligence, and only then will they be able to understand spirituality. The intellect which only thinks about objects, and the intellect which is covered with the mode of dhamma, stonus, such an intellect cannot understand and grasp the message of the scriptures or of the guru. This is the first consequence that comes. People say that you gave a very good discourse, but I did not understand anything. This is an intellect of the mode of dhamma, stonus. Otherwise, it is understood that it was not able to grasp it. Second, because one cannot understand the message of the scriptures or of the guru, the doubts on the path that leads to our well-being do not get removed. If there are doubts on the path that leads to our well-being, and our scriptures have never said no to doubts, people have questions and this is fine, then in order to remove those doubts, one should understand the message of the scriptures or of the guru, but the intellect is retarded because of the mode of dhamma, stonus, and therefore one's doubts do not get removed. These doubts just remain doubts. Shri Krishna has spoken about this earlier in the Gita that Shanya Atma Vinayashyati, his doubts are completely destroyed. This is because after intellectual retardation, doubts cannot be removed. And the third thing is that because the doubts do not get removed, Shraddha, faith in the firm worship of the means to liberation, does not arise. And this path is such that it is the path of Shraddha, faith. It is the path of the occult, and in this the intellect is fine because it will help for a certain distance, but then one has to walk on a path of Shraddha, faith. Ganeshji has 1.5 tusks instead of 2. The broken tusk is representative of the intellect, and the whole tusk is a representative of Shraddha, faith. In the path of spirituality, one has to walk with the support of Shraddha, faith. But an intellect that is enveloped by the mode of dhamma, stonus, cannot grasp the message of the scriptures or of the guru, and as a result its doubts are not removed, and as a consequence Shraddha, faith, is not created for it on the path of liberation, and it remains deprived. The third characteristic of an intellect of the mode of dhamma, stonus, is that it gives wrong arguments. An intellect of the mode of dhamma, stonus, gives wrong arguments. The intellect then becomes used to misinterpret meanings of the shruti, the scriptures to be heard, and the smruti, the scriptures to be remembered. It turns the meanings upside down. When I speak to very intelligent people, then they come up with such strange things. They say that there are Ashwamedha Yagna, horse sacrifice descriptions in the Rig Veda, where a relationship was made between the wife of the person performing the yagna and the horse. O person deprived of intellect, read the Rig Veda properly. Big pundits, priests give such interpretations. They say that in Ashwamedha, horse sacrifices, the horses were killed, and that in the Naramedha Yagna, human sacrifices, there was an increase of violence at the time, and therefore humans were killed. They say that all of this is written in the Vedas. These are all stupid people. The reason for this is that they have not seen the Vedas like the Vedas really are. This is an intellect of the mode of dullness. They create upside down meanings. They give wrong arguments. This is an intellect of the mode of dullness. I've already said what Ashwamedha Yagna, horse sacrifices, were. They did not involve killing horses. Just like there are trade exhibitions today, or computer exhibitions in the computer business, what happens is that all the different manufacturers and people who have developed them come together with their goods, and the businessmen display their goods. In one place you can see everything together with seminars, and conversations take place about how this business can be developed, how it can be done properly, and how it could be of most use to society. All of this is happening there at the liberation. These conferences are taking place. Ashwamedha Yagna, horse sacrifices, were those type of yagna. Yagna means to gather people for one cause. Yagna is made up of three things. Who remembers this from the earlier classes? Dev Puja, worship of the gods. Sangati Karnam, to gather people for a noble cause. And Dan, donations. Therefore, in those times, horses were very necessary animals, in particular for fighting battles. Every year or every 2 years, someone or the other performed the Ashwamedha horse sacrifice. What they would do is that all the horse keepers throughout the whole of India would come to one place, and all of those people would have conversations and exchanges of thoughts. People say that we have heard in Ramayana that these people release horses, and if someone tied that horse, then they will fight this person in a battle. These are all symbolic things. By saying that the horse was released, this means that every year this happened, that when the Ashwamedha Yagna, horse sacrifice, was going to happen, then 6 months before this, one horse will be set free. Because if a king thought that his horse is the greatest out of all of them, then the horse would be released to find out if anyone had a horse of that type. This horse was taken in each and every kingdom. It was asked whether anyone had a horse of that breed. They said that we have carried out research in a field of horses, and we have brought a horse of this much greatness. Therefore, every king would see whether they had a horse of this type, with that height, that weight, that power, and like that. If they did not have it, then the king would accept the fact that we do not have a horse that is greater than this one, and your horse is the best. And by saying that, they tied the horses. The meaning of this is that if the king had a better horse, then he would stop the horse and send a message that we have better types of horses than this. Science has developed more where we are. If that was the case, then the king who sent the horse would say, "Is that so? We are sending our men from here so that they can have conversations with your men." This was called a war of speech. People did not go running with swords. They said that we will send our representatives to your kingdom so that we can understand how your development has progressed faster than ours. This is such a nice and logical thing, but people have held on to it and say that they tie the horses up and then they would kill them to offer them as oblations, and this was Ashwamedha, horse sacrifice. Were the rishis mad? The same thing of gathering people for development happened with everything. It also happens with cows so that they can find the best cows of all. This would also happen that people will find the best goats of all. And in the end, Naramedha Yagna, human sacrifice, took place to find out how human beings could become great. If I were to say it in today's language, then it would to see how their health could improve. These are all different types of yagnas, but the people of intellects of the mode of dullness create false arguments. And the fourth characteristic is seeing things in a perverted way, contrary to the truth. How is this? This is seeing oneself as a body. The person thinks that I am this body. This is called seeing things in a perverted way, contrary to the truth, from the perspective of spirituality. This is a characteristic of an intellect of the mode of dullness. Charvak of the atheist school of thought says, Yavat jivet sukham jivet runam krutya guram pibet. Basmi pratasya desya punaragami kutaha. Live happily while you're alive. Never give up using ghee, clarified butter. Take out loans and enjoy your life. Because once this body is turned to ashes, then how is it going to come back? This is seeing things in a perverted way, contrary to the truth. They say that the body has been made up of the 5 great gross elements, and when one dies, then the body will become amalgamated once again with the 5 great gross elements. They say that, who has seen this heaven and hell? Has anyone come back to tell us? This is a perverted way of seeing things, contrary to the truth. Charvak, the atheist school of thought, was in India 1,200 years ago, and therefore he said that one should never use up give up using ghee, clarified butter. But if Charvak was here today, in today's times, then he would say that runam krutya suram pibet, never give up using fried oil. And what lack of such Charvaks is there today? These people see things in a perverted way, contrary to the truth. They consider such things as past births, the world beyond, and the unmanifest to be a myth. They say that there's no such thing as these. This is a characteristic of an intellect of the mode of tamas, dullness. Therefore, the four things mentioned are thinking about objects, intellectual retardation, giving false arguments, and seeing things in a perverted way, contrary to the truth. They see things in a perverted way, contrary to the truth. If a person is saying something good, that if you do this then good will happen to you, then they take the completely upside down meaning. If a robber is going to commit burglaries and a good person says to him that do not commit burglaries, it's a sin to steal, then the thief asks him, is that true? I'm benefiting from stealing. Do you not like it that I'm benefiting from this? If this is not an intellect of the mode of tamas, dullness, then what can you call it? This is an intellect of the mode of tamas. They keep taking the upside down meaning. They do not think that this person is stopping me from stealing because he's wishing for good things to happen to me and he's wishing for my well-being. Rather, such a person looks at the short-term gain, that I'm getting this and so I'll take it. He does not think that my future will be filled with darkness because of this. This will lead to my destruction. My radiance and splendor will get destroyed. He does not think about any of these things. This is an intellect of the mode of tamas, dullness. He sees things in a perverted way, contrary to the truth. These are the three faults of the intellect. We should use the intellect against the intellect. These are the three faults of the intellect. The intellect cannot take the right decision in three circumstances. The first fault of the intellect is confusion about what you should do. Therefore, when the intellect is confused, it is unable to make decisions. The second fault of the intellect is emotions. When the intellect becomes too emotional, then it's unable to make decisions. It can also happen that it takes the wrong decision because of this. The third fault of the intellect is wavering. These are the three faults of the intellect: confusions, emotions, and wavering. Do not consider the intellect just to have faults. The intellect also has strengths. What is the efficiency of the intellect? The intellect has efficiency in four matters, and only the intellect can do this. Therefore, the greater the intellect of the person, then the clearer that the person is about four things. The first strength of the intellect is reasoning. This is the strength of the intellect. Until when does the strength last? It is while the intellect remains within its reasoning. When the intellect goes from reasoning to unreasoning, then it becomes an intellect of the mode of tamas, dullness. The intellect has the strength as long as it remains within the limits of reasoning. The second strength of the intellect is critical thinking and critical analysis. The intellect can do this. It can do critical thinking. The third strength of the intellect is a very big strength: problem solving. This is the strength of the intellect. If any problems arise in life, then the intellect solves them. A person has been doing this since prehistoric times. They were getting cold. Suddenly the cold weather increased and people began shivering. They thought that what can we do? What can we do? What can we do? The intellect began doing its work. Suddenly they realized that we should make a fire, and then they brought leaves and dry wood from the jungles and lit a fire. They sat by the fire. Therefore, in prehistoric times, they used the intellect. This is because it was a problem that it was cold, and they solved it. There were many different types of problems, and they were solved. Then they would make clothes and solve other problems. All of the development that has taken place is because of the strength of the intellect, the problem-solving capacity. The more intelligent that the person is, then the more problems that he can solve in his life, and the less intelligent that the person is, then the more confused he is. And if one is confused, then they're not able to solve problems. Problem-solving is the capacity of the intellect. The fourth capacity of the intellect is creativity. The intellect can do this. The intellect is so creative. I often think about one drawing and the subject of it, of a horse or a sunrise. So many pictures must have been drawn in the world of a sunrise. It is just one subject of a sunrise. Also Ganeshji. This is only one subject. How many pictures have been drawn in the world of Ganeshji, and they're all different from each other? Valerie sent so many to me on WhatsApp, and each of one of these pictures are nice. This is the intellect, creativity. It does not stop at that one thing. It does these things in a different way. He keeps doing things in a different way. Even though aubergine curry is one thing, it can be made in so many different ways. Is such an intellect lacking? You can fill them up, you can cut them, you can make them as a whole, you can heat it. This is only one poor aubergine, but the intellect has changed it in so many different ways. This is the creative process. Creativity is a strength of the intellect. Why am I speaking about this? It is because if a person understands the limits of the intellect and the strengths of the intellect, then he can develop its strengths and overcome its weaknesses. If a person does this and they have an intellect of the mode of tamas, dullness, then it will go to becoming of the mode of rajas, passion, and if it's of the mode of rajas, passion, then it can go on to becoming of the mode of sattva, goodness. That is why it's necessary to understand the intellect. This is the intellect. Shri Krishna says that an intellect of the mode of tamas, dullness, is enveloped by darkness. This is another thing about the intellect. It is covered up. And don't consider it to be very bad if the intellect is enveloped by the mode of rajas, passion. Rather, it is very attractive. This packing is so attractive while it's covered. On the majority of occasions, an intellect of the mode of tamas, dullness, looks very good. It keeps creating illusions. It says that whatever is satya, truth, should be kept inside, and attractive packaging should go on top. This is how the intellect is enveloped by darkness. An intellect of the mode of tamas, dullness, can also put dharma in there in order to hide the secrets of dharma. It makes it the least important and puts such an attractive packaging on top that it puts a person to work. It makes a person go to bath 5 times a day, go to the kitchen 6 times a day and do all of this. It puts a person to work in such a way that he cannot do anything else. This is an intellect of the mode of tamas, dullness. This happens to everyone. And I'll say another thing, that rather than an intellect of the mode of rajas, passion, the intellect of the mode of tamas, dullness, appears at peace, but that peace is destructive peace, and that peace is lethal peace. There are so many differences between the steadiness of a rock and the steadiness of a yogi. When the rock is lying there, then it just stays there, whereas a yogi is steady. The steadiness of a rock is steadiness of the mode of tamas, dullness, whereas the steadiness of a yogi is steadiness of the mode of sattva, goodness. In this way, an intellect of the mode of tamas, dullness, is like a rock, whereas an intellect of the mode of sattva, goodness, is like a yogi. The Supreme Soul will now show the different types of dhruti, steadiness. In the next verse, God shows dhruti, steadiness, of the mode of sattva, goodness. Driyata yaya dharyate